Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be talking about a little bit of JavaScript today, continuing along with Eloquent JavaScript by Merjan Haverbeek, going over one of the subjects from Chapter 6, The Secret Life of Objects, talking about prototypes. This is kind of an interesting little section here, something that's completely new to me about JavaScript. But then once I kind of read over it, I'm like, wait, this is just talking about, honestly, like classes. It's like prototypes are the precursor to what you use classes for. Like if you're thinking about this in a Java sense. And again, Merjan is going to touch on this in this chapter about how to make classes and objects in JavaScript. And it's something that's not really, in my experience, I have not really used. I haven't really seen used as far as classes. Objects, yes, everything in JavaScript's an object. But as far as classes, I don't really see classes written like that in JavaScript. Java, completely different story. But in JavaScript, I don't really see it. So I don't know how useful prototypes are more than just like something to learn and think about how programs run, programs are structured. Yeah, I that's the best way for me to explain it. And what exactly, let's just jump right into it. What exactly is a prototype? Well, a prototype is another object that is used as a fallback source of properties. So when an object gets a request for a property it does not have, its prototype will be searched for that property. And this is called like going up the prototype chain or walking through the prototype chain. And I got that from the Mozilla documentation, like walking up the prototype chain. So if your object doesn't have that certain property, it's going to go to the object that your object inherits from, which is in JavaScript, it's object, which is similar to Java, where everything inherits from the object class. So you have access in Java to the toString methods and like the clone method. I think it's clone. I think it's clone methods because everything object is the parent class of all the classes that you make. So you have access to those. You have access to the toString. You can override the toString method. You can override the clone method. I'm pretty sure it's clone method. But anyway, so what do I mean here by a prototype? Let's say, what should we call this? How about this? Let animal, and I really hope Repel.js works today because it was giving me some fits earlier. Let me tell you. So we have a height and a weight, right? So we have this object, animal object. It's got a height and a weight. And the prototype of animal is going to be object. So how does Merjan kind of show you about prototypes here? How does Merjan show you about prototypes here? Well, Merjan has an example where they show a comparison using object.getPrototype of. So object.getPrototype of get prototype of, and let's do animal. See, I don't know why this does not work. All right, it should work. This should work. Let's switch it over to CodePen. And I have a previous example in CodePen. So we have this empty object, right? Let me give this a proper let's say it's 70. Why is this barking at me now? 70. And then let's console.log new empty. Okay. Sweet. So we have this empty object. It's a really bad word for it, empty. It's got two attributes, right? Height and weight. They're both numbers, right? So we use this object.create method to create this new empty object using empty from empty. So new empty, you got to think this is like the child of empty. It's going to have a new empty's prototype is going to be empty. And as you can see there, so we have this new empty object, right? It's not really displaying anything, but let's say we do this. Let's say we do call height. What's this going to get? It's going to get 70, right? Because it's inheriting from there, right? Same thing if we did weight, it should print off 60, which is empty's weight, right? What if we did this, and as you can kind of see in my example down there, now new empty dot length is going to be equal to 100. 100, right? Let me clear this. So now if we do new empty dot length, access the length property, it should print off 100, right? But what if we did this and say empty dot length? We're getting an undefined because there is no length property in empty. The length property is particular towards this new empty object that we created from empty. So I know we haven't gotten into prototypes kind of just yet, but this is just a way to visualize this. This length property is only on the new empty object. However, because we created new empty from empty, it's going to have access to these attributes too, the height and the weight. But length, we created and assigned this number 100 to the length property of new empty. So it's only going to have that. Empty doesn't have it, basically is all I'm trying to say there. Okay. What if we did this now? Using that object dot get prototype of, and let's say new empty. Do you see what this prints off? Height and weight. Essentially, it prints off the empty object. So the prototype of new empty is empty. That's kind of what this is saying, basically. And again, what is a prototype? It's the object that is used as a fallback source of properties. So when an object, again, and I'm just reading from the slides over here on the right, when an object gets a request for a property it does not have, its prototype will be searched for that property. Right? So in kind of a way, when we printed off new empty dot weight, weight is not specific to new empty. So it goes up the prototype chain to its prototype and it says, hey, do you have a weight property? New empty's prototype is empty. Do you have a weight property? Well, yes, I do. So we print off 60. We print off 60. Really quick, if you were to do object.getPrototype of, like, let's say an empty object, so literally, let's try this. Literally an empty object. You get empty object, you get object, which that's where all the objects inherit from, is that empty object. So the prototype of an object that is empty is object. So you still have access to like the toString method, right? Because if I did this, okay, let 0 equal ba-da-ba. Now let's see. Oops. 0.toString. What does this print off? Undefined. Object. See? Function toString. Native code. Is that what it printed? Hang on, go back. 0.toString. What is this? Yeah, okay. Function toString. And then this toString belongs to the object class. I guess it would be. Okay. So even if an object is empty, its prototype will still be object. And let me just make sure of that. Let me read Mergen, because Mergen put this. So who is the prototype of that empty object? It is the great ancestral prototype, object.prototype. Right, okay. Gotcha. So essentially, what this is showing is even if you have this empty object, 0, you can still access this toString property of it, this toString method of it, because that toString method comes from the object.prototype, the parent prototype. Now, this is a little different for functions and arrays. So if you were to do, get a prototype of, let's say, like an empty array, object.array, or function, arrays derived from arrays.prototype. Get prototype of a function. So we could say like, I don't know if we could do this. Just have an arrow function in here. Oh, okay. No, we can. Okay. So function. How did Mergen write this? Oh, right. So instead of an arrow function, let's actually call a function. Math.max. Not mat. Math.max. There we go. Function. Okay. So not everything inherits from objects is basically what I'm trying to show you guys here. Functions derive from function.prototype. Arrays derive from arrays.prototype, which we saw right there. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. So shared properties derived from its prototype. So we kind of saw that up top. One thing I tried to do here was have like a class-based structure to this, and then kind of show you guys. Let me uncomment this. Oh boy. And then kind of to show you that this, it works with classes too. So like you write this class empty, it has a constructor. And here's the weird thing about this prototype thing. Here, if I switch over to the documentation, it's this part here. Nope, not that part. Not that part. It was this part. So it's important to understand that there's a distinction between an object's prototype and the prototype property on constructor functions. I know this is where it gets really weird. So there is a difference between an object's prototype and the prototype property on constructor functions. So you're asking kind of what is the difference? Well, an object's prototype is kind of like where it inherits from. The prototype of the constructor, prototype where inherited members are defined, revisiting create. The constructor property. Every constructor function has a prototype property whose value is an object containing a constructor property. This constructor property points to the original constructor function. As you will see in the next section, properties defined on the person.prototype property, or in general on a constructor function's prototype property, become available to all the instance objects created using person constructor. Hence, the constructor property is also available to both person1, person2 objects. These should both return person constructor. I don't know if that's going to work in here, but we're going to try. So we have this class, right? And then we create this new object, right? And then new object is an instance of empty. It has a constructor that takes in one parameter, and then it's got a speak method, and that takes in one parameter. So we created this new object, right? So this should be valid. We can call the speak method, and we're passing in hi, and all it's printing off is hi. Okay, that makes sense. If we did, I'm trying to think. Yeah. Now if we console.log constructor, what's this going to get? Cool. Okay, so it prints off the class empty, which is where it inherits from, right? What if we do empty.constructor? Function. That makes sense. Function anonymous. Oop. And then what if we did console.log new.prototype? So we're accessing the prototype property. Does this print off anything? It prints off undefined. What about if we did empty.prototype? We get object, inherits from object. Okay. But for new.prototype, we got undefined. We got undefined of that. And maybe that makes sense because we didn't... We created new from empty. Empty is going to inherit from object. You can see how this is getting confusing, guys. You can see it. But really, the gist of what prototypes are really stemming from what we went over up here. When you create, right, when you create a new object from another object, it's going to have access to those properties. Its prototype is that parent object. That's essentially what prototypes come down to. And again, I have not personally used this in JavaScript too much. I don't know of any cases where you would use this, because from what I've been told, you want to keep anything object-oriented, keep it on the server side, keep it, keep it in Java, have it stay away from the client, basically. Now, Having said that, you can build with Node.js, JavaScript in your backend. But again, even in like the Node projects I've done, I haven't seen these class-based files being written. So I don't know. I think it's still kind of good to know, just so you are aware what inherits from what and what you have access to. But again, I don't know if you would actually write like this. And I'm sorry if I confused you all from this from this section. Really, this is really going to lead to classes. That's kind of what I think about when I see this prototype. It's just leading me to classes, which is going to be the next section that Mergen talks about here, is classes. Anyway, so that's really what prototypes kind of remind me of. It's just like paving the way for you to learn classes. Anyway, guys, let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, sorry if this was confusing at all. I just hope you got the main points there, though. Shared properties derived from its prototype. And what's a prototype? A prototype is an object that is used as a fallback source of properties. When an object doesn't have a property, it's going to go up the prototype chain to the parent, basically. Gosh, thank you guys so much. If you listen this far, thank you so much. We'll do another JavaScript video later on. And we're almost done with Lookout on Parenting. I'm parenting here, so I'm excited for that. Look out on the horizon. We're going to make a new book announcement too. Super excited. Guys, thank you very much for listening this far. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And that's going to do it. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.